Okay, we are live. It's been a while, but we're on here. Hey, Daryl, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Welcome, everyone, to another Freedom Summer 2020. This is a civic engagement training. So, we welcome you tonight. Again, Freedom Summer 2020, as many of you know, is a campaign to mobilize 1 million Black voters in this election season. So, we're excited to be here. I'm excited to be here again. And to have joining me for this civic training is Daryl Joy Waters. Welcome, Daryl.
Hello, hello.
Now,
Thank you again for having me.
it's great. So now let me just say that I know Daryl from seminary. Daryl and I went to seminary together. She left me because she did graduate 2 years before me. And Daryl, correct me if I'm wrong. You're currently in seminary now.
Yes, I'm in the THM program at Emory.
Okay, great, wonderful. Well, when I knew I had to do the civic engagement training, your name came to mind because you are civic engagement, right? Not
Yes.
right, because it was just a couple of months ago that I contacted you. I contacted Daryl on an unrelated matter, and she was out there protesting in the streets and was able to take my calls in between during your break time, I think it was, because you told me you were getting ready to head right back out there.
Yes.
So I'm so glad to have you on here to speak about your experience. Not only have you been active, and I would say been an activist for some of the issues, the injustice issues that we're dealing with, and the protests that have been taking place related to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, but you've also been into campaigning, right?
Absolutely. I've been campaigning as a child, and I actually did some campaigning today because there were some important elections out there that we did not let slip through the cracks.
Okay. And you also ran for, is it Louisiana House?
Yes, for Louisiana House of Representatives.
House of Representatives. So you're really involved, you're really engaged out there. And one of the things that I was hoping to start with is if you could just explain a little bit about why this engagement, why being involved is so important to you and what's motivating you to be
Sure.
engaged.
Sure. Well, I thank you for that question, Mr. Cupid. All of my life, all I've ever known was to be civically engaged. Before I even knew the term civic engagement, I knew what a voter registration drive was. I knew what a
Mhm.
health fair was. I knew, when we needed to go fight for, human rights and what have you, and stopping human trafficking on I-20 and things of
Mhm.
that nature. And so we have to continue to be involved because, times like this are extremely pivotal.
Mhm.
And for example, we have the census 2020.
Right.
Well, yes. So our people, we were all supposed to fill out the census back in April.
Mhm.
April 1st was census day. So my house, we filled ours out, and then we went and walked, and knocked on doors like, hey, make sure you fill your census out. Just simply reminding, our neighbors, even in the midst of coronavirus, we were all masked up, and, we took a risk, walking outside of our houses, but nevertheless, it meant something to us. And particularly my neighbors do not have social media. So they're not going to read on social media
Right, right.
that, oh, we have the census going around. Well, we all know that with census comes cents and dollars and how funding is
Mhm.
distributed. And so I can go scream, cry, holler down at City Hall when it comes to writing policy, or in the
That's
streets
right.
when it's, when
Mhm.
it comes to activism. But we all have to do our part to be civically engaged and involved. And so, I commend you and the work that you are doing. I
Thank
know.
you.
Absolutely. I
The
know
whole
that,
team here.
today, yes. And I'm glad to be a part of what you all are doing and accomplishing, because we must have a high voter turnout. We cannot continue just to talk and to run our mouths on social media. We actually have to be about it. And we have to, make sure that, again, call, text, walk, whatever it is, to make sure that people get to the polls.
Right, right. And as you mentioned the census, I think we need to remind people, I don't know if you just mentioned it or maybe I missed it, is that you can still go on and fill out your census forms. I
Correct.
actually checked online today and you can still go on. So if you did not fill out that census, please fill out that census now, fill it out after this call, fill it out during the call, because like Darrell is saying, it's so critical to the funds that are allocated to our communities, right? So I thank you
Absolutely.
for that. And not only, you also recognize that there's been a lot that we've been doing. So I just want to commend the Black Church Action Fund for the work that they have been doing, because it's the Black Church Action Fund that has pulled us all together and that has gathered us to do this important work of getting people out to the poll, making sure that individuals and people know, communities know what the issues are, and encouraging congregations to mobilize their communities. The Black Church Action Fund is a strategic initiative answering the call to elect leaders committed to ending mass incarceration, defending the right to vote, curbing gun violence, and representing equitable treatment of Black and Brown communities. There are prominent faith leaders from across the nation that have come together with the commitment of reclaiming political power in our communities. So the Black Church Action Fund is the answer to an injustice system that has run rampant. And I think that we're seeing a lot of that today. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. I have not ever seen anything like this in history. And I think most people have it, the current situation, the injustice, the civil unrest. So we're so glad that the Black Church Action Fund has convened this, is gathering us together. And we must remember that the Black Church Action Fund seeks to work towards the liberation of all, say all with me, Darrell, all Black lives, including women,
All Black lives.
right? Women, men, children, and the LGBTQ plus family. So we are glad to have you here. It is our mission to build Black independent political power by leveraging the existing infrastructure and relational networks of the Black church. So I would like, you mentioned earlier the census, and I would like to know, like, what are some other ways that folks could become more civically engaged? We talk about the census and we speak about voting all the time, but I think there are people out there that are constantly asking the question, well, what can I do beyond voting? And we can't underplay voting, right? Because that's extremely, extremely critical and it's important. But what else would you suggest, Darrell?
Sure. So, now that we are in a time such as this, where the coronavirus, unfortunately, is still
Mhm.
out there, if you have the internet, you have access, and you have the ability to be civically engaged and involved in a number of ways. So, I mean, you see everything from online health fairs, to forums, to city council meetings that are online, to police jury or other forms, of government. And you do not have to necessarily be, the smartest person. All you have to do is have heart. All you
Mhm.
have to do is, know how to call a spade and say, you know what? This brings about disenfranchisement. This brings about, inequity. And being willing to address those things, whether it's participating in sign-on letters, or
Mhm.
whether it is actually our city council back at home in Shreveport, they have the comment section. And
Right.
so, I mean, people can type like their comments and hear their comments talked about and discussed during council meetings. So, and you can do those things, and not even having to fully disclose like who you are if there is a security or a comfortability issue,
Mhm.
and so there are a number of ways that we can make sure that you are plugged in and that you are fully engaged and that you stay involved. And also, know your limits. Know
Right.
your limits and
Absolutely.
and and know your lane. Yes. For
Mhm.
example, when I was out there, at the marches and protests every day, one of my friends at home, Candace Baptiste, she reached out to me and she said, well, I hope you all know that, I'm still doing the work and that, I'm not gone or haven't disappeared. And we said, Candace, we know that you are doing the work.
Mm.
And at that time, she was working on a smoke-free Louisiana. So that basically included making sure that bars and making sure that the casinos, the riverboats, are smoke-free. So not just restaurants and other public places, but just making sure that all public places in Louisiana are smoke-free. And that was a part of her work, her policy, making and so forth. And so, we just had to affirm her in that way. While we're out here, screaming Black Lives Matter, you're doing the same exact thing. You're just taking another route and another initiative, and nothing is wrong with that, because we know as Black people, we have to be turning on all cylinders, and addressing more than one issue. We can't all address the same issue, because if we put all of our energy behind one issue, it's a plethora of others that if they go unaddressed and they get, passed over, then we look back and we're like, oh, wait a minute, we didn't know this happened, or we didn't know that happened. And a lot of times, conversations that concern our communities don't always include us. And so that is why we have to stay ahead of the wave.
That's good. That's good. And, we're going to discuss some of the issues that are critical today. And I think just that example that you gave with your friend, trying to get the smoke-free environment, then when you look at it, it gets back to the all Black Lives Matter, right? The fact that we have health disparities in our community. We have environmental issues in our community. So definitely, as you're saying, it's a front from a different, it is work being done from a different angle, from a different, perspective, or on a different issue, but it's all interrelated. It's all interrelated. And I thank you for
absolutely
that point. Right. So,
and I will say this quickly, Minister Cupid, that all of the work is valuable. As long as it's for the promotion of all Black people, all Black people, not some, not your friends, all Black people.
Right.
As long as that is the cause, then hey, kudos to you.
Yes. Amen to that. Amen to that. So one of the things that excites me about Freedom Summer 2020 is, as in Freedom Summer with the Civil Rights Movement, is just the work that we do among the Black churches, right? We know that in the Civil Rights Movement, or even before, the Black church has always been active, has always been forefront on the issues impacting its Black congregants, the Black community, and everything like that. So I'm really excited about the work that we're doing. But what I would like to hear you speak about, and I believe you worked at one point with the National Baptist Convention, was it?
Yes, at one point.
Okay, right. So tell me, let's just speak a little bit more about the role of the church in this day and this time at this moment. And does that differ any from the role that the Black church played back in the Civil Rights Movement?
Sure. So I will say that I actually just got out of a class discussion about this, the role of the church. Yeah, so that's so coincidental. And I will say that the role of the Black church is important. And it's not enough to be first, be right. It's not enough to be, at the forefront for clout, for name recognition, and so forth. Make sure that, your policies and the things that, you're working towards, basically that it affirms all Black people, that it's healthy, that it is not, patriarchal or condemning, of people. And so I believe that the Black church, has always played a role, just as you mentioned, the Civil Rights movement. We saw the Black church, arise to, just a level of unity. And I will say this, not every convention participated in the Civil Rights Movement. There were, so I just want to make that clear. Not every Black convention participated in the Civil Rights Movement.
That's right. And we find the same thing today.
Baptist, absolutely. And that's why we have a Progressive Baptist. And so, I just find that, again, it's not enough to just draft a statement and put it out there, on Facebook. You all actually have to do the footwork that comes along with it, and do the work that it takes to stay relevant.
Right. So let's just
stay relevant.
And
let's
unpack that a little bit. The footwork and what that footwork looks like. Because one of the things that we're hoping is that people listening today, those that are in churches, women in ministry, all clergy, including women in ministry, laity, will take these civic engagements that they would pass it on to their members, that they would start training. But what are some other ways that they can speak to these issues or address these issues?
Repeat the last part of the question. My sound went out just a little bit, and I
Sure,
heard
sure.
address the issues, but
What
it
are
was a
some
that I
other
didn't
ways
get.
that the church, so we talked about doing the footwork, and for
Absolutely.
those that are still questioning what the footwork really is and what that looks like, what are some just suggestions that we can make?
Sure. So the footwork looks different for every church. It looks
Mhm,
different for every ministry inside the church. It looks different for every household. And so let's unpack that. So I will say, for example, for my house, when I'm at my parents' home, the work for us is making sure that our elders have a ride to the polls, making sure that they know who and what is on the ballot,
mhm,
making sure that, we had an election in July, I want to think.
mhm,
And it was an unexpected election, but it was in July. And we found out in my parish that there were several people who showed up at the polls as they usually would. And they're saying, oh, you've been purged from the voter roll and what have you. So
right,
just like doing the work that it takes. And in Louisiana, things are a little bit maybe easier than in some states. So, for example, we have early voting. So we have about roughly like a 2 week window for early voting from 8 a.m. or about 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. at night. And so we're fortunate in that way. Also, we can register people online. And
mhm,
our clerk of courts has made it very easy. Secretary of State has made it very easy for us to call and to confirm somebody in their polling place so that they can feel, that bit of comfortability. And again, it just depends on what role, you want to play.
mhm.
My family may play one role, but maybe there's another family out there like, I want to get involved. I want to be involved. And so, I have known restaurants, Black-owned restaurants, and so forth to choose to donate, meals for election day, or just, in general, just like a Sunday dinner, just because we've been, in coronavirus. And so, again, there are a number of ways, and I'm interested to hear some of the ways that you feel as well, that we can just make sure to stay connected, but also, involved.
Right. And I think what's critical is, of course, the messages that we are sending from the pulpits and in Bible studies. I think this is a great time to just start planting the seed in individuals' minds, people's minds. During this COVID or this pandemic season, it does pose a challenge to us, and it forces us to reimagine ways in which we can communicate with our congregations, in which we can mobilize individuals. But I think with a lot of churches starting to do outdoor worship, that's a great time to do voter registration drives. We've had that at our church. And sending out messages, first of all, reminding people every week, like you did, sending out messages, sending out text messages, to doing phone banking at the churches. There's so many organizations that are willing to partner with churches who can start doing phone banking. So I think those type of things are critical for us to start doing. And like you said, letting people know who's running. And sometimes that poses a challenge to churches, right? Because we have that whole 401(c)(3) thing going on. So you have to kind of like be careful and walk the line between endorsement and just saying, look, here are the folks that are running, here are what they stand for. So I think those are some of the ways that we can bring more awareness in our churches. Unfortunately, it's hard to say to take folks to the poll. That it poses a challenge with the pandemic. But
Mhm.
what I like is in states that you do have the opportunity to do mail-in voting, I
Mhm.
think that there's a lot of education that can take place there with teaching people how to fill out the ballots and even doing online trainings about filling out ballots, because I think sometimes that can be a challenge, that people are not filling out their ballots correctly. And once it's mailed in, then it's not used or it's tossed because something is not correctly done. So I
Yeah.
think those are some of the.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the mail-in ballot system, and I will just say, be careful if it's not you physically filling out the ballot, and you're trusting somebody else. Just make sure that, if you can go back through and look to see who they marked, then that is super, super critical, because sometimes we have people who are dishonest, unfortunately. But I have known that mail-in ballots definitely, work, and typically usually they will get counted. For example, in Louisiana, when I was at Princeton, I don't know if you have ever seen me during the election time, but I would
Mm.
actually request ballots to be mailed to Princeton, and I would fill out that ballot in a heartbeat, and then I would have somebody that was in the base with me like certify this right quick. I need a witness, and so, but
Right.
yeah, and then I would just mail it back. And
Mm.
there are groups that cover postage costs depending on, I guess, like where you are and so forth. But there are groups that cover postage costs. And one time my ballot was delayed getting back to Louisiana.
Mm.
And so the clerk's office, they called me and they, said, hey, we're looking, we have your ballot request. Did you mail it back? And I said, I did. And they said, okay, we don't have it. Can you fax it back? And so I was allowed to fax my ballot in. And
Mm.
that was, that's a part of our state guidelines and laws and so forth, So again, Louisiana is pretty fortunate in that way. But nevertheless, make sure that if you are in a state where you have mail-in ballots, make sure that you get it in on time. And if not, if you want to call and confirm, you still have the right on election day to call and confirm and to take that extra initiative.
Right, right. And I'm so glad you brought that up because while I was at school at Princeton, I also did mail-in ballots. Well, really, it was an absentee ballot, and I think I like it better than actually showing up at the polls. And I'll tell you why. In this election season, I think it's so important to start planning ahead about voting. And we'll speak about voter suppression a little bit later on in this conversation, but it's so important to plan ahead because one of the things that I had to do was, with the whole primaries mixed up because of COVID, they sent me a primary ballot. And then when I got it, I was like, well, wait a minute. They postponed the primaries. So they were going to send a second one. So one of the things I did was I called in. I was like, hey, am I supposed to be waiting for a second ballot? Where's my ballot? And they said, okay, we mailed it out to you on XYZ date. You should receive it in a number of days. So just to remind people, call and follow up, find out what's going on and follow up on that ballot. The other reason I like that option is because I'll admit there were people on that ballot that were running for office that I had never heard of. I didn't know who they were for like things like civil court judges, borough presidents, and being able to do the ballot at home gave me the opportunity to do my research. So I started looking folks up and trying to figure out who are they, what do they stand for, what is their agenda, and then I was able to make a more informed decision as opposed to showing up at the ballot box and then seeing these names and thinking like, oh, just simply voting on a party line or something. But sometimes when it's the primaries, you have multiple persons. So you still have to make that decision. So yes, if you could do the mail-in ballot, absentee ballot, please do that. But please do it early. Don't wait for the last minute. Thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. And I will say this
Mhm.
because I have worked elections in Mississippi. My friend Tony Johnson in Hinds County, Jackson, Mississippi area, she is what they call an election commissioner. So if
Mhm.
you feel that something is going wrong, or you don't know if your vote got counted, and etc., again, you do have people that you can call on, specifically election commissioners. That is what the title is designed for. And
Mhm.
so I don't know if we use the same in Louisiana, but I do know for Mississippi, like it's a very, very real thing. And they actually still vote by hand ballot in Mississippi. And so I've seen them
Mhm.
actually physically counting ballots, as well as, running them through like an electric scantron thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, so again, just depending on your state, know your state. And if you don't know your state, it's okay to ask someone who has a little bit more knowledge, maybe about, how elections and so forth work in your state.
Right. And there's so many organizations that you could go to online. I invite everyone to visit www.thefreedomsummer.org, and you can register to vote on that site. You can check your voter status on that site. So please do that. While we're on the topic of voting, one of the things that I do want to speak about is there is obviously, and rightfully so, there's a lot of focus on the national elections right now, right? But I don't want people to overlook what's happening locally in their states and in their cities, because I think that I would say that they're all of equal importance, right? And I just would like to speak a little
Absolutely.
bit, maybe you can speak a little bit towards why we would make that conclusion that they are of equal importance. What's going on the local and state levels, since you actually ran for office on the state level?
Sure. So there is a popular phrase, Minister Cupid, that says, all politics is local. And
That's
I
right.
have found that to be true. And
Mhm.
so, everything, it's almost like the anatomy of the body, right? And so, one thing can't move without the other. And
Mhm.
so it's not enough to be present at the top and not present, all the way around. And
Right.
so a lot of times, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of media and so forth that go into congressional and into presidential races. And
Mhm.
so when we look at like our city council, our school board, or whatever the other, titles may be, it's just as if, it's just as if, they're going to win. I don't have to go to the poll. And I have found that some voters are strictly emotional. And
Mhm.
so, if they feel the the emotion and the conviction to get up, to go out and vote for you for something, either like on the municipal level or on the state level, they're going to go to the polls.
Mhm.
However, if they don't really feel it, then you might have a problem. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, I believe that it is also a local and state government's job to make sure that the citizens have access to information as well, not
Mhm.
just around election time or coming up to election time, but more specifically, the local government and state governments need to make sure that people have, consistent access, and that the access to the information that they give, that is relevant, that
Right.
is relevant, and that it is transgenerational. So it's not just good enough if you and I get it, right?
Mhm.
Our moms have to get it, our grandparents have to get it, our younger siblings have to get it, our young nieces and nephews. It has to be transgenerational information, and that requires just making sure that the packaging of it can reach multiple demographics and age groups.
Right. Right. So it's actually one of the things that I did want to speak about, the 6 policy areas that the Black Church Action Fund, are actually 7 policy areas in which we focus on. And when we speak about vote, that all politics is local, right? I think that these different areas that we're dealing with, these focus areas or policy areas, all speaks to what's happening not only on a national level, but what's happening on a local level. I mean, if we look at criminal justice right now, just beginning with that issue, right now we have another case of a police shooting. Right, a police shooting. He survived, but he's paralyzed. Jacob Blake, and this is on the heels of still protesting for justice in the Breonna Taylor case, right? And still waiting to see what's going to happen in George Floyd's case. And this is something that we're seeing that's repetitive, and we've protested and nothing is being done. But I think one of the important things when we look at local politics is seeing how the local politics feeds into one of the things I noticed is union agreements when it comes to police departments and what the union agreements are, because that dictates a lot of the process and the procedures that police departments take after these incidents take place. In addition, I think that local politics is important because whatever takes place in the police departments, that's a local, that's a city, that's a state decision. It's not something that we're really dealing with on a national level. So even though you might go out and vote for president, or you might go out and vote for a congressperson, it's still not dealing with what's taking place in your city and the policies that need to be changed in that city, which differs from state to state. Did you have anything to add?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
No, look, you are spot on. You are definitely spot on, and for example, I traveled just the other day from Louisiana back to Houston, Texas, and my mom actually called me this morning, and she was telling me about the gentleman that he was, still alive, that he was,
Mm-hmm.
shot in the back. And I was like, oh, I missed this, and usually I don't miss.
Right.
And so I was just very like disheartened. But nevertheless, there is there's a certain level of accountability that, I believe that as the Black church, we've made sure, just in its totality, so like collectively as, different denominations, we've made sure that, police were held accountable, and that local government and so forth are held accountable. I just feel like sometimes there is a passiveness that others may feel because of us maybe not being as enraged
Right.
as but as soon as we are enraged, it's like, oh no, well, we want peaceful protests, like we don't want the looting, and so like we want something else, and so I find that the Black church definitely, just down through the years, has done its part, in its totality. And so again, I would like to see things shape up and change, and I understand defunding the police, and I understand abolishing the police,
Right.
but I believe that there are certain measures that we have to take as a people to see that actually come to fruition and come to pass, and that is just very, very questionable, as if we as a people are willing to take those measures, or if we will just settle and say, you know what, well, we'll just take what we currently have, because maybe the latter is a little bit more scarier than what we want to really make happen.
Right. Right. And what we want to do with some of these trainings is just to get the information out there about what are the issues that we should be concerned about, right? As I mentioned earlier, the Black Church Action Fund has 7 policy issues. There's job, we're talking about education, we're talking about health, we're talking about environment, local spending, voting, and criminal justice. And it's so critical to understand the issues that are impacting, that are facing your community, so that you can vote accordingly, because often it's not about personality. We're not voting for a personality. We're voting for individuals that are going to have our interests in mind. And you're not going to know who has your interests in mind unless you actually know the issues that are impacting you and that are affecting your lives. So when we talk about what's at stake, we're just going to go through and talk a little bit about what's at stake. Due to COVID-19, the unemployment rate in this country hit 16.8% for Black communities, which is like a record high in almost a decade. Our communities, once again, they bear the most substantial burden of economic inequalities. And then in addition to that, this current administration, whose name I don't often like to say, this current administration has rolled back several federal programs. We had SNAP rolled back, unemployment insurance, and we see that we're still trying to get unemployment insurance due though many people cannot return to work because of this pandemic, they roll back Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and these are programs that have disproportionately benefited Black Americans. Because a significant number of Black Americans live at or below poverty line, these policies have lifelong consequences on the well-being and the vitality of our communities. So it's important that we put that focus on jobs, we put that focus on education. So even in the Black communities where we have individuals attending schools, we're taking out student loans at higher numbers than our white counterparts and are left with in debt at higher numbers than our white counterparts. So these are critical issues that we need to look at when we look at the candidates and what are they saying about loan forgiveness, right? What are they saying on how are they negotiating unemployment, which is a big topic right now? So both the way we look at education and poverty is that they're two sides of the same coin that's inextricably intertwined, and the gospel compels us to see the needs of our community as holy. And the thing about it is that as we look at scripture and as Christians, we're not just professing that these things should be done because they're morally right, but we're also looking at what scripture, what the Bible has to say about these things and how the Bible speaks about these issues. Look at Jesus and the life that he lived and what did he stand for as he walked this earth. Daryl, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that? I see you in agreement.
Look, I'm over here giving you all of the amens, all of the amens. I am your amen corner. Tonight, you hit it spot on. You hit it spot on.
So the Black Church Action Fund is saying when we look at jobs and education, what we need to be talking about or thinking about are programs like Federal Job Guarantee, which will be a federally funded, locally administered program that guarantees a living wage, right? And when we say living wage, we're not talking about just $15 an hour is what many are advocating for, but still even $15 an hour is not enough to live in. I live in New York City. That's certainly not enough here in New York City. So we're talking about getting a living wage and full benefits to everyone in need of a job and help eliminate poverty wage employment. It will also reduce the racial wage gap. With education, I mentioned it before, we need loan forgiveness, but also we need funding for our HBCUs, our historically Black colleges and universities. We need pre-K, funding for pre-K programs and increase in the services or the resources for public education, because we still know that there's quite a disparity in the quality of education between Black and brown communities versus white communities. So these are things that we are advocating for, and we're asking that as you make your decision and vote, that you take these things in mind. Another issue that I think, Daryl, we touched it a little bit earlier before is the health and the environment. There's generations of racial trauma and racialized practices within healthcare systems that have made Black Americans susceptible to various diseases. A number of these diseases have been directly linked to environmental factors. And I myself, while doing chaplaincy programs, I've seen the differences in communities. I've seen the health differences that our Black and brown communities has been plagued with. And these differences have been spanning for decades. And under the guise of this administration, the EPA has intentionally cut back on federal environmentally important justice work that would seek to alleviate the growing concerns surrounding pollution and access to clean water. And we look at that, we see it's just, what was it, just this week that we see the court makes a decision as to how much money will be paid out to individuals who are affected by the water in Flint, Michigan. Right. And
Mhm.
that's a crisis that's still going on to this day, and health concerns that have affected children who intake has taken in the lead water, the lead ridden water. So these are additional issues that we're focusing on. We see that right now this administration has put absolutely no priority into climate control, or right. So these are all things that we will want to focus on. Next, we have considering what are some of the policy agendas that we could look at. We've talked about Medicare for all. Even with Obamacare, there was such a fight on that, and so much energy is being placed into trying to roll back so many of the provisions for that, when really what we need is to provide a Medicare system for everyone. There is no reason that anyone in this country should be without insurance. African Americans live with chronic conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, HIV, AIDS, high blood pressure, which leads to strokes, at far greater rates than any other racial group. And at the beginning of 2019, it was documented that 13.6% Blacks did not have health insurance compared to white counterparts, averaged at 9.8%. And I think, like, even with health and environment, all we have to look at is the current situation that we're in right now with the COVID pandemic and the disparities that exist with this pandemic.
Absolutely. And it is important to note that when I get my insurance, you don't treat me any less or any more than somebody without insurance,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't treat me any less than you would someone else if they don't look like me.
Right.
Meaning, when you ask me my pain level, we know that Black women, or Black women died in COVID, young Black women, they did not have to. Young Black women are dying in childbirth and they don't
Mm-hmm.
have to.
Mm-hmm.
Believe our pain when we tell it to you.
Amen.
Believe our symptoms when you read it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And get proper treatment. Just what you said reminds me of a doctor's visit I had. This was several years ago. And I went in it was like a little foot issue. And when he told me what the issue was, and I said, well, what's the solution here? What's the treatment? He just looked at me and he said, well, you can't afford it. And I was like, well, how do you know what I can afford? You know nothing about me. So just this idea that we walk into the office and there's assumptions that are made about us, without even, and because those assumptions are made, we're not even being presented with the proper options for treatment. So I just thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I actually have all Black doctors. My
Mm-hmm.
primary care physician, Black. My OBGYN, Black. Specialist, Black. If I go to a doctor that does not look like me, that means
Mm-hmm.
that I could not find a doctor with my skin hue to treat me.
Mm-hmm. And
It's
that's so
unfortunate,
important. Yeah.
but
It is important, and I think it's important for us to start maybe establishing networks, even within our church, networks that we can share who
absolutely.
our providers are, because I have been to physicians who've told me, I'm sorry, I can't help you because I'm not familiar with your skin tone to determine what's going on. So yeah, that is
Yeah, and
critical.
we've witnessed what telehealth had to do, whether we wanted to believe in telehealth or
Hmm.
whatever. Like we are witnesses of like telehealth. So We can't settle for less. You know, we have to take what is ours. We cannot settle, you know, for less. Mm-mm. If you could see me in coronavirus across state lines, you can see me now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, lastly, local spending and voting. That is one of our policy agendas that is critical. We spoke a lot about voting earlier. And we spoke a bit about voter suppression. There are 34 seats up for reelection in the Senate, currently majority Republican, right? There are 435 seats in the House, currently majority Democrat. And there are 11 gubernatorial elections with 7 of the incumbents listed as registered Republicans, right? So as we mentioned before, and I don't think that we can overemphasize this, that it is important to go out and vote. It is important to know who's running, what they stand for, and to make sure we go and vote and exercise our voices. Make sure that we have a voice in what's taking place. There are approximately 224 million individuals in the U.S. that are eligible to vote, and with various gerrymandering and potential voter suppression tactics, each vote is important. Each vote counts. You know, one of the things that I would like to know is, what do you say to those folks that say, well, look what happened in 2016? There was a popular vote. Why should I go out now?
That's a tough one. And I'm saying that it's tough not because you can't find the right words to say, because we can all, you know, come up with something
Mm-hmm.
worth saying, but it's tough because that was a harsh reality and still is to this day. You know, look at who's in the White House,
Mm-hmm.
because of the Electoral
Absolutely.
College, solely because of the Electoral College. So, you know, I would say that we still have to stay involved.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of really over the whole, oh, we have to, you know, choose between the lesser two evils. I'm not really
Right.
with that. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's my personality. Like, I ain't really with that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we've done enough of choosing between the lesser two evils. It's the matter of still showing up for ourselves.
Right. Right.
When you go to the polls, you're showing up with you in mind. You know,
Right.
when you, or your nieces, or your, you know, your family, you know. So when I show up, I'm showing up. I'll be very honest, because Kamala Harris is the vice president nominee, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
showing up for my sister,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm showing up for Black women and
Mm-hmm.
myself. I'm showing up for the Black church. I'm showing up for my sorority, you know. So that's why I'm going to the poll. I'm not going to the poll for any other reason, you know. But I know that I have to continue to show up, because if I don't go to the poll and
Mm-hmm.
cast my vote, somebody else will.
Right.
I don't know
Mm-hmm.
who they're going to pull the lever for, but I know that I know who I'm pulling the
Mm-hmm.
lever for.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think there's still strength in numbers. You know, yeah, we saw an outcome that many people did not want. And obviously, because the popular vote said that that wasn't the preference of a majority of the people, but there's still strength in numbers. And I think that we see what's happening right now with voter suppression. The conversation with the U.S. Postal Service and slowing down the services that they provide in anticipation that people are going to be using mailing ballots, right? Some of these voter ID laws that try to make it difficult for individuals to register. And I think it was in Georgia that we saw them getting rid of some of the ballots, right? Purging some of the ballots. So when we look at
Right.
all these antics, you know, I feel like we know that it's happening now. We see it, we know what's coming. So it's even more important for us to go out there, get involved, to go out there and cast our votes, because they're hoping that by everything that's going on that we will be discouraged. They're hoping that we will decide to stay home just because we think it's not worth it, or we think that our vote will never make it to the place that it needs to make it. But don't fall for that. We can't fall for that. We have to go out there.
We
We have
can't
to cast
fall for
our
that.
votes, especially those of you in Washington State, in Montana, and in North Dakota. You have gubernatorial races. Those of you in Florida, Michigan, South, North Carolina, all those battleground states, the ones that I haven't even called out yet, go out there and vote. Go and let your voice be heard. If you need inspiration for why, I personally think it's a biblical mandate that we do these things, that we go out there, we exercise our voice, because that's what Jesus did. But if you need inspiration, you could turn to the scripture, right? In Deuteronomy, we heard Moses was telling them to choose for each of your tribes individuals who are wise, discerning, and reputable to be your leaders, right? So go ahead and choose. Moses realized that he couldn't do it all himself, and he had to appoint people in place to help with the work that was done. And he told them to go out and choose. He gave them a provision, or he gave them some guidelines, people who are wise, who are discerning, who are reputable. So we went through the 7 policy agendas. Look at those agendas that really we need to look at the agendas that really matter to our communities, and we need to see who lines up with those agendas, right? I think it's not about our feelings, our emotions, as you mentioned earlier, but who lines up with the agendas that most impact our lives. Proverbs 29:2 is another good one that says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, people groan. And there has been a lot of groaning in this land. There has been a lot of groaning in this land. But we can't just groan. We can't keep just groaning. There's some work to be done.
That's it. That's it. There is work to still be done, and we must continue to do that work. We must continue to do that work. So look, I thank you for your sacrifice of just always doing the work, always showing up. I know
Right.
your
And I thank you
background
for
is
what you're
resume.
doing as well. I thank
Thank
you
you.
for what you have been doing, and you've been out there in a different way than I can. So I thank you. I said, well, you stand in proxy for me, and I'm grateful, because while you guys are out there protesting, I'm praying for you guys, and I'm
Thank
looking
you.
to see, okay, when the protesting, well, I hope it doesn't stop, but when it comes to a stop, how do we move that and transfer that into policy? And hopefully we all can find out a way to jump in that policy making, and this is one way to do it. So I want to just present you with final remarks. Daryl, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, I was in class and I learned of, you may have already heard of this term, but protest pastors. And
Mhm.
so, look, when I know that you're always sending up prayers, a kind word, you're always a listening ear. So I consider you to be one of my protest pastors. So, just thank you so much. And again, going back to what I said previously, we all have our duties. We all have, the things that we are called to do. And everybody is not called to go out there and fight the fight in the street. Some are called
Right.
to do just as what you are doing right now, sitting on
Mhm.
a Zoom call, presenting, making sure that our people have information, making sure that our people have access, making sure that our people know where to go get resources
Yes.
outside of Facebook, outside of Twitter, outside of Instagram. So again, you are committed to the call, committed to the purpose. I want to thank the Black Church Action Fund for having me tonight. My light died, unfortunately, and we're actually about to get ready to endure some remnants from the hurricane out here in Texas, and
Okay.
so yeah, it's
Mhm.
just not a lot of lights. I apologize if my light died.
That's okay.
Look, the light might have died around me, but it has not died in my soul and in my heart. So again, thank
And
you all
praise
so
God.
much. Look, and I'm looking forward to just a long-term partnership with the Black Church Action Fund. Anything that I can do, just let me know, and I am always there.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to have you. And I thank you for your time. I thank you for the work that you have done speaking truth to power. And I hope and I pray that you just keep on doing that work and let us know how we can have your back because we're all in this together. And I just want to remind everyone, please visit www.thefreedomsummer.org, register to vote. Don't wait till last minute. Get out there and vote, do your research, find out who's running. And I would also say my last thing that I want to say is do your research. And the reason I'm saying that is I had a conversation with someone this week who expressed, they took that concept of judging between the two evils, voting for the lesser of two evils, I'm sorry, that you mentioned earlier. And they said, well, I've been reading up on such and such, and they said XYZ. And I was like, what? I've never heard about that. So I went on and I started doing some research and fact checking only to find out that it was all lies. And I said, well, where'd you get that? They were like, on the internet, on Facebook, and listen, there are so many sites that are pumping wrong information, deceptive information into our young people's ears. So please, when you find something, it doesn't sound right, it doesn't measure up, please check it out, look into it, do some research because there is a lot of I'm hesitant to use the term fake news, but there is a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of lies out there. Let's just say that. There are a lot of
That's
lies
it. That's
out
it.
there, and we need to distinguish that from the truth. So make sure that you do your work or your research to find out what is true so that you are an informed voter, that you are an informed citizen. And lastly, I just want to say that we speak so much about voting, but there are people out there who are not registered to vote because they can't register to vote. Maybe you're not a citizen, whatever the case might be. Know that there is so many other ways that you can still contribute and that you can work
Absolutely.
to get involved. So I say to all of you, there's work to be done and come on in. There is enough room. The harvest is plentiful, right? And the workers are few. So thank you so much. And God bless you, Darryl. Thanks for being here and have a good night, everyone.